has delivered many benefits, no doubt about it. However, there's also many drawbacks, which the current pandemic is painfully revealing, and which will only exacerbate if we look ahead at the global population growth, rising middle class, and other macroeconomic projections. So just look at the fact that I put on the slides here. For every dollar of revenue generated in the food industry, we as a society incur $2 in cost or externalities. One in social costs, like for instance, healthcare, and $1 in ecosystems related costs, like for instance, the depletion of our soil. Now, if we simply look at that fact, I think we can all agree that the food system is ripe for disruption. It's ripe for a revolution, which we would call the food revolution. But that revolution requires a paradigm shift. Now, many people talk about paradigm shifts these days. It's becoming one of those buzzwords, a little bit like the word ecosystem. And I think actually very few people realize the profound nature of such a paradigm shift, which is why I would like to pause and actually describe and compare and contrast our current paradigm to the new paradigm that I would advocate for. So our current economic system is linear. It's a take, make, and dispose model that relies on the premise of infinite growth. And that linear system is grounded in what I call a mechanistic paradigm. And in that paradigm, we view the world as a machine, as one giant and intricate collection of cogs and wheels. And one of the key drivers of this required infinite growth in the system is efficiency, which basically means we're doing more of the same with less. Now, that race for efficiency combined with this view of the world as a machine in which we seek to maximize the individual elements of the system creates a very fragile system, a system that is prone to shock, which COVID proved once and for all. And in favor of that efficiency, all the redundancies have been designed out of the system. Every element of the system has become highly specialized, skills are being maximized, stocks are minimized, and feedback loops are being removed because they're not efficient. Now, in contrast, the circular economy is an adaptive and feedback-rich restorative economy by design. It's a complex adaptive system, which is a complex term for a system that's basically analogous to living systems. A circular economy aims for an equilibrium, a dynamic stability achieved through effectiveness rather than efficiency. And the circular economy is an open system. It's constantly in relationship with its environment, and it must constantly adapt itself to changes in that environment, just like natural systems. And again, in contrast, the circular economy optimizes the system as a whole than trying to maximize individual elements. So what does that mean? Yes. So if we look at the circular economy is being adapted more and more widely. We see some of the core concepts like benign chemistry being applied to carpet tiles, desk chairs. We see light, jeans, and even construction materials being sold as a service. But when it comes to adopting the circular economy, food, in my opinion, has been lagging, which I personally find astonishing. I mean, it's the one product that we actually ingest. And furthermore, most of the examples of circularity in food that are being coined are actually redirecting or converting byproducts and waste streams into new products. Now, they're great steps forward and they're desperately needed, don't get me wrong. But we might ask the question whether they are truly circular. Do they really resolve the underlying systemic issue? Or are we simply optimizing the current system, and in doing so, potentially actually perpetuating that system? Or as Brown, Gatt, and McDonald wrote it way more eloquently and shorter, doing less harm is no good. So that's why I actually propose that we shift to a new era. a regenerative area. And in this light, I would describe the circular economy of food as a food system which has a positive social, ecological, and economic impact by design. Now, just to come back, because I know who's on the phone here, back to my previous point, such a system includes upcycling. Please don't quit the meeting. If we take into account the social, the ecological, and the economic impact, upcycling is a part of the solution. However, if we don't, it might perpetuate the problem. So it's always important that we take that systemic lens and ask ourselves those questions. Now, to jumpstart this transition to a circular food system as I laid out here, I focus on 4 things. I'm going to take you through each of them and give you a quick example of what we're doing with them. All right, let's see those slides move. Yes. All right, first thing. So first up is language. Today, there is no one simple and comprehensive definition or taxonomy for the circular economy of food. Basically, if we ask 10 people, we get 10 answers. And as circularity is becoming more and more commonplace and being adopted by the general public, that common language is becoming even more essential. It's essential to ensure that we can leverage the innovation power of everyone around us, and especially on this call, and at the same time also ensure that we do not lose the essence and impact of the concept, avoiding that it becomes basically just another buzzword for recycling 2.0, hence my comment on from the question. So that's why, as an example in a series of initiatives that we've been taken last week at the AI for Good Summit, we announced that we've joined forces with XPRIZE to develop and design a circular economy-based framework, a taxonomy, for a series of challenges that we can then launch to help meet the SDGs. Now, the second point is metrics. Now, to date, we have no easily accessible and comprehensive metrics. And as I mentioned before, the circular economy is a complex adaptive system. So boundaries within such a system are arbitrary. In other words, if we're focusing only on 1 or 2 indicators, let's take CO2 and water consumption, for example, we might actually be having, with the best of intentions, perverse effects, destructive effects on indicators that we haven't been looking at. For example, biodiversity or labor risks. So what we need is an easily accessible set of metrics that measures social and ecological impact of our food products. Because only then we will be able to know where we're at, measure our progress, and also compare options and influence our choices. Now here we've partnered with How Good, a startup from Brooklyn, in the development of an impact assessment tool for products at an ingredient level, which is called Lattice, and you can find more about that solution actually online. Now, third thing are design principles, and I think everybody here will actually really understand this. Even as me, as one of the few scholars in the circular economy of food, and in my job at Danone, I'm unable to simply and clearly explain to the 1,700 passionate developers that come to work in our organization every day, and to all of you, all of the innovators, all of the accelerators, platforms that we're interacting with, how to simply use their power and passion to make food more circular. So the next priority is to develop and design a circular design guide, a set of simple principles that will allow us to leverage that passion and that power, because we as innovators have the power to change the system. Anywhere from within a large CPG to a small venture to consumers standing in front of a shelf. So this is where we're working with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation to actually develop these principles and to capture them in a design guide, which we will be launching hopefully at the end of this year, if not early next. And then the final and fourth one are iconic examples. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're here today. If we look at the impacts of some examples like Schiphol Airport, the airport here in Amsterdam, and Philips buying light from them as a service, and a few others like this. If we look at the impact that they've had for the adoption and the understanding of circular economy within their industries. I mean, think about it. Circular economy is a complex concept, and selling a future of abundance in which our consumption might have a regenerative impact, being socially, ecologically, and economically positive, feels audacious at least, and dreamy to some, and probably spaced out to quite a lot of others. However, once you have such an iconic example, all of a sudden it makes this concept tangible, and it can do an awful lot for the adoption and the acceleration and towards this vision in an industry. So that's exactly why I think we're here with EIT and all of you today, and why, to give another example, we have joined forces with a group of like-minded corporates like Google, Mars, and Givaudan, who you'll be hearing from later, but also the startup How Good I mentioned, and NGOs like Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the World Economic Forum, to partner with Thought for Food last year at World Food Day to launch the first ever Circular Economy of Food Challenge. And interestingly enough, we had 2,000 submissions from 175 countries that participated, some of them actually which also participated in EIT, and some which even won prizes with EIT recently. And this not only has been an opportunity to develop examples, but it also has been an opportunity to actually take those metrics, those design principles and the taxonomy, and make it available to innovators through their digital labs. And for us also to learn from what is really working with innovator. How can we become a platform, and can we provide a tool to everybody who wants to change the world for the better out there? So this is all going to come together actually on the 16th of October. So I would like to invite all of you to tune in on to the finale of this event. You'll see astronauts, you'll see superheroes, you'll see the DJ's Goldfish, so you're all invited to come see that, and also have a look at these tools and use them. They're an open tool so that everybody can have access to it. So to conclude and hand it back for some questions, I'll go back to where we started out, where I started out. Food is lagging when it comes to the adoption of circular economy. We need solutions that solve the underlying systemic issue and that are regenerative by design, having a positive, again, that social, ecological, and economic impact all at once. But this is a joint effort. It's a systemic challenge that is way too big for any one of us to achieve on our own. However, all of us, and especially all of you here, mavericks, change agents, innovators, no matter whether you are in a startup, you're in a corporate like Danone, we all have the power, and I'm sure we have the passion to start innovating our way towards that different food system, to put the circular economy of food on our plates. And I'll hand it back.
Merijn, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Guys, in the Zoom chat, feel free to add some questions. I've got to say that it makes a lot of sense. You know, we have to learn from nature. You know, bioecosystems teach us that our own ecosystems should be filled with diversity and balance. And we can't do this alone. I think that's what we're trying to create here. This is just the start of bringing all you great stakeholders together to bring in your insights and thoughts and opinions and expertise. So we have one question right now from Santo at Kroger. Maybe Santo, you want to even ask it directly? If Santo's on mute, then I can ask on his behalf. So he says in the Zoom chat that circularity also needs a shift in consumer behavior. But how do you break those barriers that are reinforced by ubiquitous convenience in our current consumption trends? So you'll see it there in the Zoom chat, Merijn, but it's about, you get it, okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's no simple answer to this, nor is there a simple bullet, a silver bullet, I would say. But without saying that it's easy to do, one of the things is that the difference between the sustainability paradigm and the circularity paradigm is that, for instance, convenience is not necessarily at odds with circularity. You can design for convenience as long as you ensure that your solutions have those positive impacts. So that's one. Now, again, that doesn't mean that that's going to happen overnight or that that's going to be easy. The other thing I would say to this is that just like us innovators around the call, I think also the consumers are more than willing and happy to vote for the world they want. And they actually have the power to vote for the world they want every time they spend their euro, dollar, or whatever they're spending. However, what's hard, and that's why I mentioned it, is that when I was talking about metrics, is when you're in front of a shelf, how do you know what you're voting for? So this is where having those system indicators that can allow people to actually use that power and passion, just like us innovators, and when we innovate, similarly, allow consumers to see what they're supporting. I think that is a very powerful tool. But again, that is not a silver bullet by any means, and it's not means that it's an easy thing to tackle. It does mean that we all have the power to start tackling it and experimenting with it.
So clear. I think this whole piece as well about we've often in the last few years everyone's talking about human-centered design thinking, which is important, of course. It's great that we're now putting the user at the center, but what about the planet? And then it's often become a debate of, is it planet or people? But why can't it be planet and people? Which I hear what I hear you saying there. Planet and people-centered design is what we should strive for. Okay, I think this is a question here from Peter. This will make this our last question, because then we're going to hand over to the startups. So he says there that it seems we're a bit here in multiple egg hen situations. All your four principles have to be tackled at the same time. Most appealing to the wider public would be an iconic example. Are you aware of a good or advanced example within a subsector or part of value chain or eland?
Yeah, so I'll give a two-prong answer to that one. So thank you, first of all, for the question. And the first one, not aimed at Peter, aimed at humanity, me included. The very question is mechanistic. Because in a mechanistic system, we rely on intra and extrapolation. So there's an order to things, where in a complex adaptive system, they're emergent. So as much as all four are important, it doesn't matter where you start somewhere. And I just want to highlight that because we can sometimes be paralyzed by that complex notion, and it would withhold us from actually taking action. But just simply experimenting is all you need to do, because innovation is the adaptive power of this system, just like, for instance, procreation is the adaptive power of mankind. And procreation gets it wrong 99.99999% of the time when we have mutations. But that's okay, because it's that one time that you actually do have an advantage that's going to morph the system. And it's the same for us. Now, back to Peter's question, because it's a great question. No, I don't. And that's why we are in support of, for instance, this platform. But one of the realizations that I came to is that in absence of one perfect example that can embody all the principles, what if we actually paint the picture just like, let's say, a Netflix show Chef's Table does about food? What if we just use storytelling to paint the perfect picture? And so in that vein, on the 16th of October, you actually see a video where we're trying through a whole array of different examples, highlighting what key elements of the circular economy of food that these startups, these initiatives are embodying. We're trying to piece together the entire story and saying, look, this is how the food of tomorrow could be. Because when we worked with the Rockefeller Foundation, there was an interesting, on developing the Food 2050 prize, there was an interesting stat. We looked at how many utopian and how many dystopian food futures are out there. And the number of utopian is 2. And that is not a percentage, 2 in absolute. So I also think that we need to paint more utopian pictures about the future of food. Because only when we can see it, when we can imagine it, we can start innovating towards it. So thanks for the question, Peter.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate the questions and great answers, Merijn. We're going to have to move on now. I've just shared on the Zoom chat a link to Meet Mighty Networks. There's time for networking during the break at the end of the session. Everyone, if you get on there, you'll be able to share, connect, and network there beyond today as well. But thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Great insights.
Thank you.
Cool. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Natalie now.